this video, let's cover how we can run artificial intelligence in a browser tab, locally, private, and for free. So we have a couple of options here. We're currently in legal review, and at this point in time, this agreement needs to have a consultation with another internal business unit. And the way we handle that is to submit a legal service request. Now, there are two ways to do this, and in a prior video, I've shown that, but I'm going to just go with this task-based approach for now, and we'll just have something to put as a comment here. Sending for privacy review. Right. The benefit of the legal service request is it allows you to submit in parallel your request. Now, what we can see happening here is we have the form, we have the agreement, the parent agreement, if you will, and we have a representation of that agreement visually here. All of this is customizable. We don't have to see this agreement if we don't want to, because we do have it over here. But if we wanted to copy and paste from here and fill in the form, then that gives us that ability. This certainly could be moved over to this column or below. There's plenty of options here. One new option or feature that I want to focus on here is the Enable Web AI. So let's turn that on, and as we can see here, we're checking to see if we have a local model, and we have a local model now ready. Now, what we can do is we can start to ask questions of the agreement if we wanted to do that. So in this brief example here, we can say, what is the governing law? And what's going to happen now is the agreement, along with the prompt, is going to be sent to the language model. And the language model locally is going to return an information about that. And you can see here the information that it returns. So we can continue to ask questions of the agreement if we want, but in this case, our focus really is to create a request for that privacy team. So I've already got a prompt here that I've pre-constructed, and I'm going to send this prompt now to the local language model. And in this case, it's Gemini Nano that is running. Now, again, none of this data is leaving this machine. Everything is staying local. And the performance, depending on how powerful your computer is, but that can be impactful here. But at this point, we're at a point now with the models being in the browser tab that if you have even a very basic machine, it's going to work. So what's happening here? Well, in the prompt, I asked it to construct a request, and it's going to go through and it's going to, basically read the prompt. It's going to take that to the large language model. Now, there is an agentic play here that I've done. So I am using a quasi or an actual AI agent. I still think the definition of that term is very suspect. But what I've done is append to the prompt some additional instructions. Now, we've seen a lot of that happening in Claude Code and other tools where they're putting harnesses around the prompt to help the language model figure out what to do. Well, as we can see here, if you noticed, over on the left, we went from no values being selected to everything being pre-populated for us. based on the prompt. So in a way, I guess we can call it agentic AI. What it really is some code that I wrote that keys off of the prompt. So in this case, the prompt used a keyword of create. And I could do this a lot of different ways. We can absolutely have the language model return more information for us, but I kept it very simple. So in this case, my tool call, if you want to consider it a tool, or my agentic call, was triggered based on the keyword create. And what it did is it said, okay, at the end of generating whatever the prompt is, I want you to create some JSON output. Now, I'm showing that here for purposes of just bringing attention to how this works. We can certainly hide this so the user doesn't need to see it. However, it might be wise to keep it there. Why? As a validation check. So if the value that was selected or interpreted by the LLM is erroneous, it's not as though you just see the check here and the value of what was here. You can determine where it came from. I call that a paper trail. So what happened here? Well, as part of the prompt in creating all of this information based on the content of the agreement, I also said, look, create some JavaScript object notation. That's what JSON stands for. It's just a string of text. And I want you to populate the value for each of these key value pairs based on the information supplied in the prompt and the interpretation of the output. And that's what it did. So it picked that it was going to the privacy team based on the prompt. It picked that it was company paper based on the prompt. And it determined that the need by date, again, coming from the prompt. But all of this other information that it generated, well, that information I could certainly reproduce, but there's really no point. I know I have access to it because it's in my page, it's in the DOM, the document object model. So what can I do? Well, I grabbed it and I proceeded to paste it in the editor here. And so now I can modify this. I've saved a bunch of keystrokes here with this approach. Obviously this is not a big form, but let's say there were a lot more fields. Well, then you start to see some return on the investment of actually doing the prompt versus just manually filling it in. And if you have canned prompts that you just need to tweak, well, then it's as simple as copy paste and then see what the output is. Again, always verify that the output is correct. These are non-deterministic tools. Therefore, it's very possible that something may not be good. And you definitely should double check. But here now, I'm just tweaking this information because the core data came from the prompt and then the analysis. So if I'm happy with all of this, and it did what I basically wanted it to do, well, I'm at a point now where I can just finalize anything and I can remove the JSON output because that's really not necessary. And I can click submit. So now I've used local AI, all the data staying on this device, to fill in my form with an AI agent that was triggered by the return of the values from the language model and then code that I wrote, which said, okay, if that word create is in there, then look to see if you have JSON that came back from the language model. If you do, then go ahead and pull the values out and populate the form. And that's what it did. So now we can see here's the actual LSR that was created. We can see we still have legal review, so we have these documents going in parallel. Now, depending on how you want to set up the legal service request, you can have it in this instance where the agreement travels with it, and you can refer to it as easily as just picking it from the drop down. Or alternatively, you could just have the legal service request and then a link back to the main agreement. So you have flexibility here depending on how you want to structure it. But what you can see here is the document was generated. We can see the information was pulled from our form. And this is standard workflow stuff within the CLM, so there's really nothing special. But you can see here the information that the AI generated for us traveled into the request. And as I said before, you can have the link back to the original request depending on how you want to generate the legal service request. The key here is the use of AI. AI enabled us to save a couple of clicks, especially if we have prompts that we will use over and over again. That could potentially be valuable. I say potentially because you still have the issue of non-determinism here. It's very possible that the next time around, this request is framed differently. Always vet it if you're going to use it. That is super important to make sure. But we can see that the power of local AI is available to us inside Docusign CLM. And this is a custom eForm that enables us to get there and utilize it. So for those platforms, those applications that permit the use of the custom HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there is great power available to us today within a browser tab so that we can interrogate information as well as determine potential AI agentic use for working with that information. So I hope this was helpful, and please look out for more videos that'll be coming about how to embed local web AI inside your pages and using it all private and for free.